There were so many high highs, so many incredibly low lows, especially with all the OBs happening at the OTB Open. Let's talk about all the good, the bad, and the slightly absurd controversy. And I'm sorry about a long video, but I'm about to make it even longer, and that is because after recording, I saw an update from Kristen saying that she had a broken rib from a freak accident while she's doing home renovations. Absolutely devastating, and this will basically mean that she's gone for at least 6 weeks. So I hope she gets a quick recovery, but my goodness, that is just totally insane to have the top 2 FPO players get injured 1 year after the next. And once again, I am trying to get to 10,000 subscribers before Worlds, so if you could subscribe, it would really mean a lot to me. Alright, so starting off with FPO, because it is where the controversy stands, there was a very interesting situation for Madison Walker. And basically what happened is that Madison had a drive that pretty much was like totally shanked, was going right into the water, and one of the divers that had been there all weekend to like retrieve discs stopped it before it went into the water because it was like inevitably gonna go deep into the water. And this rubbed so many people the wrong way because they basically said like they ruined the integrity of the sport. You cannot interfere with anyone's shot no matter how OB it looks because there's always the potential for something crazy to happen and it comes back in bounds. And so people were targeting this specific diver who, like Madison said, spends 6 to 8 hours a day just retrieving discs for pros. So he's obviously just like a volunteer trying to do his best. And Madison even said, "Hey, will you grab this for me as I shank it?" And then proceeded to shank, in her own words. And so it just really feels like it was blown out of proportion, but so many people had issue with a spectator interfering with the shot. And obviously I get why this could be a big deal, like say for instance Umbrella Gate like a couple years back, where if somebody was not in the way, the shot would have gone totally different, would have gone out of bounds, and could have made things go a completely different way. I totally get that notion, but for the sake of us disc golfers, try not to take things too seriously. I think it feels just a little bit absurd to have so much hate targeted towards one guy, and if you think about it, if you are able to retrieve a disc the moment it goes into the water, then you have a much higher chance of using it later in the round, which can obviously have some pretty nice benefits. So while a lot of people were upset about this, I think it just makes perfect sense, and I'm certainly happy that Madison posted about it, being like, "Hey, I wanted it to happen, I'm not upset about it, stop being mean to this guy, you're being ridiculous." And it really goes to show that Madison Walker is just so chill. So with that, let's move on to the recap. So first up, let's talk about Paige Pierce. Obviously, we have seen some moments of brilliance where she looks like she's finally getting into a rhythm, but I think this was her debut to really show that she can fight for a top 10 finish. And not only that, but she has great distance, great putting, great accuracy, and while she definitely never had a chance to win, she still played great every single round, very consistent. Honestly, the biggest thing holding her back was distance, which you definitely need on a course like this. But all in all, finishing about 5 under every round, very good, and it finally gets her in a top 5 finish, which I don't think she's had in a very long time. And I just looked it up and it was Portland Open last year. That was her last top 5 appearance, which just feels crazy. And there really wasn't too much to say about it, but Ohn the dog Scoggins has continued to show up week after week regardless of the course. She finds a way to perform so much better than everyone else on the putting green, and while it never looked like she was playing amazing, she's had enough looks within Circle 2 to be able to secure basically what Paige did with an average round of about 5 under, which was definitely not anywhere close to the hot rounds, but she just has so much consistency, and man, when she gets her putter going, it is just amazing to watch. And what's funny is that this still was not one of her best putting rounds, missing 5 Circle 1 putts, but man, her Circle 2 putting was just so far away better than every other player. It was really not even close, with her total putt distance, which again, you can't trust this, but if you can, it is about 200 feet further than second place being Holyn Handley, and also getting 5.52 strokes on Circle 2 putting. Truly an anomaly, and I cannot believe that we are getting to the point where Ohn seriously can compete with most MPO players, if not surpass them. So with that said, she finishes in 4th place, continuing her stretch of being a top 10 finisher week after week. And I'm going to touch on Kat Mertsch just a little bit, but honestly, there really wasn't too much to say. While she finished in 2nd place, she never really felt like she was in it, never really had anything truly remarkable about her entire tournament, other than some amazing Circle 2 putts that were just mind-blowing. Like at so many points, I was like, wow, that was kind of like a shank of a putt, and then it just jams in dead center. So her hyzer putts are just crazy, and I'm glad she has that in her wheelhouse, but man, totally insane to watch. But really the 2nd place, while it is amazing for Kat, I think it was more so other players kind of crumbling, allowing her to get a 2nd place. So still a great finish for her, but let's move on to the top 2 true contenders, Ella Hansen and Holyn Handley. So we know these particular 2 players definitely have had a ton of moments in their career where they crumble, especially in final rounds. That has definitely been true for Holyn Handley this year, because you can just see that her game is at that level where she can secure a victory, she can become an Elite Series winner, but it just does not happen. And it certainly feels like it's around that middle portion of the round. It's not the start, it is later on when things get a little bit more serious. And I don't know if this is like a mental battle, I don't really know what what's going on, but for whatever reason, it plagued her again, especially when it comes to OBs. She had 7 OBs in her final round, which I think you could probably predict meant that she did not win this event. But what's more than that is she had 5 bogeys and 2 doubles. And while she missed 8 circle 2 putts, her circle 1 was pretty good with 8 out of 9. But honestly, the biggest thing that I felt this entire round was just pain. There was no point of comfort throughout this entire round. It felt like she was always just like one throw away from losing her entire set of confidence. And I think she really needs to have a deep dive and figure out what is going on in her mental game that allows this crumbling to happen. We know that her skill level is above and beyond most players in the division, and especially after round 2, getting 11 under, getting 14 strokes worse in the very next round is just insane. I know we've seen a lot of players crumble in the final round, but this is just another level. And honestly, it never felt like she was truly losing it, getting things a little bit too close, maybe having like an early release, whatever the reason was, she was just not fully with it. And you could certainly tell in her demeanor because it felt like she was very angry at herself after a bunch of shots. But with that said, we know she has it in her to win an Elite Series, so I think it is inevitable that it does happen. So with that, let's move on to the champ, Ella Hansen. Alright, so I have to say, Ella Hansen looked so locked in this entire tournament. I felt like she had it in the bag almost before the final round even started. Now that feels almost crazy to say because we do know Ella Hansen has had some blow up rounds, especially final rounds, but I think this course lines up so well for her. She's had great finishes here in the past. She has great distance. She has a really good ability to hit a low line gap that has to get like 350, 400. And she did that so well the entire tournament. And what is more than that is that her putting was just as good, if not better. Now again, she's definitely no Ohn Scoggins with putting, missing 7 circle 1 putts and 10 circle 2 putts. But when she was walking up to a putt, you could tell she had confidence going into it. And I think that level of trust and confidence allowed her to never feel like she was struggling in the final round, especially when it got a little bit stressful and you could tell the strokes were getting a little bit too close to Holyn. It never seemed like she was really in trouble. And although she went into the final round tied with Holyn Handley with 20 under, she maintained a very good lead, ending it with 5 under, winning by 7 strokes against Mertsch. And even though she is really good friends with Holyn Handley, you could just tell how hyped and confident she was in this moment. With only 1 OB and by far the best tee to green percentage, she was basically getting birdie looks on every single hole. And with this performance, she secures her first Elite Series win, which obviously everyone is so ecstatic for. We've been waiting for this moment so many tournaments, and looking back at Waco last year, it just felt like all the stars were aligned for her to beat Kristen and win that event. But obviously that's not how it played out. She's had some other events where it looked like she was really going to take it down, but now she finally gets her first Elite Series win. And you could have a couple of asterisks with there being no Evelina, no Kristen, but while that is true, I don't know if it would have mattered because Ella was just such a strong force the entire tournament, averaging a little over 8 under every round. And speaking of that, she finishes the entire tournament at 1005 rated, which continues the trend of FPO winners being above 1000 rated.
Huge congratulations. It was such a pleasure to watch her.
I was pretty nervous for parts of it. I know what I want to do on every shot. I don't feel like I have a question about it. I have like an aiming points. I knew I wanted to win an Elite Series, and I feel like, you know, it hasn't quite sunk in, but you know, I just wanted to keep playing my own game.
All right, next up, MPO. And there was so many interesting things to talk about here that I really did not expect to be talking about at all. First one being Eagle McMahon. Obviously, we saw his performance back at Champions Cup, and it was not stellar. Not a great first foray into the tour, but he's definitely coming back strong with a 13th place finish here. But what's more than that is that he looked like he was more like his old self, doing some insane lines, a lot of power, and just smooth, effortless putts. With 7 OBs and 4 bogeys in the first round, 3 bogeys and 1 double in the second round, he definitely has a couple of things to work through, but still a great finish for him. And I definitely look forward to seeing how he does in the Portland stretch, because I know that is probably his best chance to dominate. Next up, Paul McBeth. Now, I did not foresee him being in contention, and not only being in contention, but being the hot round to start the entire event with a 10 under. And it really looked like things are going well, with only 1 missed circle 1 putt, 40% from circle 2, but then we move on to round 2, and it is a totally different story, where despite his score not being that bad with a 4 under, the real story here was how many missed putts he had. Missing 5 circle 1 putts and 6 circle 2 putts, it really felt like his entire game kind of fell apart, specifically on the putting. And I don't really know what to attribute it to, but it certainly seems like he needs to figure it out, because when we move on to the final round, he missed all of his circle 2 putts and missed an additional 2 circle 1 putts. Now, he also went OB 3 times and kind of just like fell apart, but still the pieces are there for a great finish, and it finally seems like he has it in him to complete 3 good rounds. So we'll see what that looks like if it does come into fruition this season. Two names I really want to shout out, Sullivan Tipton and Randon Latta, and especially Tipton, who has not been on league cards really all that much. I think he was on league card at USDGC and a couple of others, but he really has not had the cameras on him all that much. So to see him perform this well with a 7 under and finishing the entire event with 1047 rated, it really shows that he has a high level of competence, missing just 2 of 10 circle 1 putts and never really fallen apart besides 1 OB on hole 17, especially with a very smooth forehand and overall well-rounded game. And then Randon Latta is not a player I know much about, but with a phenomenal 13 under to end the event, putting him in 3rd place with a podium finish and finishing the tournament with 1052 with a final round of 1082, which is even more impressive than Tipton because he is 1011 rated. So he shot 70 points above his rating. Absolutely insane. And with an eagle on hole 5, no bogeys, no OBs, 100% circle 1, this is definitely a great finish for Randon, and it really felt like it came out of nowhere, so props to him.
McBeth at 69.
I just told myself, you got to will this one in there. Whatever you have, just will it in there.
This man is unbelievable. This is what athletes live for. This is the moment.
So the real battle was between Calvin and Gavin. Now this really is not something I had on my prediction because Gavin just got 3rd place at DDO and Calvin won it. So having both of these names back right into the mix to take it down really feels so cool. But along with that, both these players are cool, so down to earth. They're probably in most people's top 5 because they're just the people that you want to root for and they bring so much positive vibes. And I was literally talking to my wife being like, I don't know who I want to win. They're both awesome, but there can only be one. So let's see how it ended. Calvin was playing very, very strong. Besides an OB on hole 6, forcing a bogey, he birdied every other hole besides hole 2. Now you might think that Gavin would kind of crumble under that kind of pressure, seeing Calvin just totally destroy, but that was very much not the case with 4 birdies on the front 9, and despite missing a couple of circle 1 putts, his game was looking very, very strong, and it honestly felt like for both of them, it was a bit effortless. Sure, there was some nervy moments, but for so many of their shot shapes, it really felt like it was in their wheelhouse to hit these lines and these low line drives. But then we get to the back half, and it looks like Calvin might run away with it after a bit of a cold stretch for Gavin. And after an OB on hole 12 for Gavin, it looked like it might just be over, but Gavin being as clutch as he is, he drains it from the drop zone, making a 40-foot par save. And that's when he knew that we really had a battle. So both of them basically kept getting a birdie par until hole 16 where Gavin takes a bogey and Calvin pars, making it a 2-stroke game with 2 holes to go. But then on hole 17, Gavin has a great drive, great upshot, basically parked for birdie. And Calvin has a great shot, but kind of has a soft upshot that puts him at circle's edge for a birdie putt. But what is important here is that he has a huge death putt. If he misses, it's going straight into the water, most likely, which would almost certainly change a birdie into a bogey, making it a tie game with Gavin. So Calvin, being the clutch putter that he is, decides to run it with the wind, jams it dead center, and it is such a hype moment. We know that Calvin can make any putt, but especially in those final round moments, it feels like we see that less and less because for whatever reason, he seems to sometimes not have that confidence that you need to drain a putt like this, but that was certainly not the case, and he jams it, making a 2-stroke lead going into the final hole, and you know he's not going to choke that. So with that, Calvin wins, making it a back-to-back Elite Series win, silencing all the haters, saying that Calvin was not going to be the GOAT this year, not going to be the player of the year, which he still is not. It still is very much AB that has that title, but it finally feels like Calvin is in the running. And sure, having his forehand back definitely helps, but what's more than that is that I think he just has his confidence back. He really was ice cold, no emotion, even when he has a tremendously scary death putt on hole 17.
You know, I think most of the time you walk up to a putt, and if you don't think you can make it, you lay up, and we got up there. I felt the wind, I felt I could make it, so I ran it. So I just think that's how you should always play. Feel like you can do it, do it.
And I think that stretch between holes 8 and 9, where he gained 2 strokes on Gavin, really helped him with that confidence that he needed to finish strong. And while Gannon did have some great putts this weekend, a very crazy stat is that AB and Gannon Buhr each have more finishes outside the top 5 than Calvin did all of last year. Now this feels totally insane, but it really goes to show that Calvin is the most consistent player. Sure, he may not win every event, but he is always in the running, whereas AB and Gannon seem to be a bit more fluky. They do have great finishes, but there are a lot of instances like this weekend where they are outside the top 10. But what I really want to talk about next is Gavin. He is really redeeming himself. He has had so much adversity after the torn labrum, after getting dropped by DD, after getting 3rd place at DDO. There's just so much to say about Gavin. He really had to take it in stride, getting the injury, getting dropped, playing phenomenal disc golf, being one of the best disc golfers a couple years ago. I think a lot of people forget about it because we're in like that new era where it seems like there's just like a million people in contention, but he was playing playing when he was basically in contention most events. So the fact that we're getting back to that point where he can finish top 10 and not feel like it's like some weird thing, it is so freaking cool, and I'm so excited for him. Sure, the nerves are definitely still apparent, especially with that bogey on 16, missing 2 circle 1 putts, and his missed circle 1 putts weren't great, but overall it feels so good to have him back, fighting for the win week after week. And he really is somebody that I root for so much, so I'm so excited for this finish for him, and I really wish he could have taken it down, but this will just fuel him for future events. So overall, I think this event was good, but I still don't love the course. I don't love golf courses, but I do like that they made some changes, made some modifications, and it definitely felt better than in past years. But overall, I just feel like a lot of the shots feel very similar to others. There's a lot of artificial OB, and much like DDO, having the same golf course for 3 rounds is just not my favorite. So with that said, seeing this at Champions Cup next year will certainly be interesting, because I definitely think a lot of people aren't in love with this course, aren't in love with the location, but with the Georgia course being unavailable, it is what it is, and hopefully it ends up being an epic event. So with that said, what do you guys think? I'd love to know. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe. Wild Runs, signing out. Peace.